So, the National Football League rolls on, and it does so without 6 more teams, as they have been eliminated, which means today we get to look at those 6 teams in terms of the offseason now. So let's go. Last week we went in order of the draft. This week we're going in order of when they were eliminated, which means we start with the Los Angeles Chargers. There is, I think, a pretty glaring hole at number 1 wide receiver, and I'll be honest, that's coming up a lot. And when we're looking at the T. Higgins situation right now, out in Cincinnati, seems like he's entering the market at the right time. Wouldn't you say? Because, like, how many teams last week did we say, yeah, you know what, they kind of need a number 1 guy out there to either help a young quarterback or whatever. This week, we're saying it a bunch, and we're starting with the LA Chargers, who absolutely, I think, need to have a number 1 in there. Like, their guys are fine. Johnson, Palmer, those guys, Ladd McConkey, that is a solid 2 through 4 as a wide receiver group. But I think you saw the limitations of that, where you need to have a big play. And we had a bit of an interesting conversation around Justin Herbert yesterday about whether he's actually that dude or not. But you need that guy who can just get open, or you can just throw the ball to in big situations to come up with big plays. They clearly don't have that. If you get a T. Higgins, I think you have that. And so that, I think, is something that would very easily help this team advance and kind of move up a tier in the AFC. The other thing that's interesting about this group is that obviously with Harbaugh there, they are a defensive focused team. And you look at their pending free agents, and it is defensive starter, defensive starter, defensive starter, defensive starter, defensive starter, defensive starter. Like, they are potentially going to lose a lot on the defensive side of the football. Now, that means they have a lot of salary cap space to work with. And so I'll be interested to see where the dollars are spent. Do they focus on, really, do they focus on the Jimmies and Joes or the X's and O's? Because if we are looking at how some teams have kind of managed the quarterback spot, or just prime example is them at wide receiver. You know what? We have a quarterback that we think, in hindsight wrongly, that we think can go out and win us games and win us playoff games with minimal help of wide receiver, because we think he is that good. And how many, there's a reason Brock Purdy got to start anyway in San Francisco. It was because Kyle Shanahan and company was like, look, we got a system and we got enough weapons around this kid that we can throw in a 7th round pick. Obviously, it wasn't entirely the plan. They were hoping that would be Trey Lance. But still, they were hoping to get a young kid in there because he would be cost effective, and you can surround him with weapons, and there you go. I do wonder if now on the defensive side, they go, you know what, we got the scheme in place, we have this style, we don't necessarily need to go out and spend a ton of money on game-breaking guys, because we have this style, we have this mentality, we have this culture that is going to just have us be this great defensive juggernaut, and we can kind of mold some of that young clay into that. So I'm very interested to see what year 2 looks like with this group, this overall management structure out in Los Angeles. But I do think that they're going to have a couple of holes in the secondary to fill, and what they do with the Khalil Mack spot is going to be interesting. He is an unrestricted free agent. There's been some talk that he is pondering retirement. He is still a beast who can get after the quarterback. I think it was 6 sacks, 9 pressures this year for that team. If he goes, they're going to need to figure out a way to replace that. Moving on, it is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Talked about it yesterday. They now, I think, need a guy at quarterback. It is obvious Mike Tomlin has established a winning culture in Pittsburgh. But I think, as we discussed yesterday, you need that on-the-field leader to elevate things around you and push this team forward. I just don't think you can do it now with Russell Wilson at $5 million this year, and then maybe we go out and get Jameis Winston for this, and then maybe next year we go out and get a Wilson at that. You know, I think you need a guy at quarterback. The problem is, again, that's not really out there, especially for them this year. This isn't, honestly, it's not really a draft for it anyway, and it's certainly not a free agent class for it. But that is still, I think, at the top of their to-do list. Also, again, we're 2 for 2 on this one. Need a number 1 receiver. Pickens very clearly established he is not that guy. I think, honestly, the biggest need for Pittsburgh is to get Pickens the fuck out of town, because he is so obviously a hindrance to the culture that they are trying to set there. And when you see this guy get all boo-boo face at the press conference and hear how they are talking about this guy in kind of the lead up to it, this is 100% to me a Singletary, can't win with him, can't do it. That I would want that guy exactly a billion miles away from my franchise right now. I wouldn't even want the Saskatchewan Roughriders to sign that guy. I think that there are guys you win with and guys you don't, and I think he is a guy you don't, and there are a lot. Look, Mike Tomlin won with Antonio Brown. There was a lot going on with that cat. The one thing, though, he was good. George Pickens, he's good for this offense. There's no doubt that this offense was worse, significantly, when he was out. But there is, I think, not enough talent in that guy to be acting the way that he is right now. So, that's it. Just figure out number one quarterback and number one wide receiver. I do wonder, because both Wilson and Fields are available now. Wilson, it did seem like he kind of turned into a pumpkin as the year went on. I still have this thought that Justin Fields might be able to be something. And so I do wonder if that is kind of the roll of the dice that you take. Like, let's not have any safety net here. Let's just see. This kid he was a first round pick, right? Either way, a guy who, very successful college career, has shown some flashes of being a quarterback that can be productive in this NFL. So let's see what he can actually do. And if it doesn't work, and you have your first losing season in a billion years, maybe there's a quarterback or two in the 2026 draft that could be available that would allow you to build things there a little bit. So I do think that's probably the way that they're going to go. I think maybe a little bit more D-line depth. It did seem like last year TJ Watt got hurt and the defense just kind of fell apart. This year, it just felt like Watt lost half a step. And I know suggesting that a Watt lost half of a step now means that I have to challenge him to a Peloton race. I think that's how that works. But no knock on his physical fitness or anything like that. It's just they ask a lot of this cat. And so I think if they can add just a little bit more depth on the defensive side of things to take a bit of the pressure off of him and really kind of strengthen a strength, that would really help this team. But honestly, I don't think they're that far off of being a very serious contender in the AFC. Moving on to the Denver Broncos, an exciting rookie season for Bo Nix ends in a bit of disappointment as they get whooped on by the Buffalo Bills in the second half of that game. And so now here we are again, 3 for 3. Probably need a number one wide receiver. Cortland Sutton was great in some moments. Franklin has, I think there's something there. But again, much like the Chargers, who we talked about earlier, they have Sutton, Franklin, and Humphrey. That's a pretty good 2-3-4, right? You feel good about that 2-3-4. You get a 1, all of a sudden you're feeling very good about that situation. And so I think you do need to focus on getting Bo Nix a little bit of help. I think the defense is fine. That defense was quite good this year for the Broncos. Maybe shoring up the offensive line a little bit, but this team is, I think this was a bit of a Cinderella season. I do think you have to accommodate for the thought that there might be a bit of a sophomore slump from Bo Nix, and maybe that he isn't just this superstar going forward. But overall, this team is in a pretty good spot moving forward right now. The Green Bay Packers. I think it was pretty obvious on Sunday afternoon what the issue is. Offensive line. Offensive line. Offensive line. Now, I don't know if that is the number one concern, but that is something that absolutely needs to be addressed. The depth on this offensive line, very clearly. But even then, again, this is the one thing I want to caution against with Green Bay this season, or this offseason, is they didn't lose that game specifically because of injuries. The injuries definitely knocked them down enough that it was going to be difficult for them to come back in that game, but they also just didn't play well enough. And so, the injury they had to Jenkins on the offensive line certainly hurt that. But their tackles couldn't block for shit before that guy left on the interior, right? So they need to get that situation figured out. But I still think the biggest need for this team is the same as it was a year ago, and that is in the secondary. And specifically, I guess, on the defensive side, just in general. That this team still isn't good enough defensively to match what they are capable of on the offensive side of the ball. And that is something I think that really does need to grow here a little bit. They were able to keep things close because Philadelphia just refused to attack the weakness of Green Bay in that secondary and just tried to ram it down their throat, and just happened to have one of the best running backs in the league to be able to do that. But I think that there is going to need to be a bit more of a focus now on addressing that defense. Also, I do think, so we'll call this 3.5 out of 4. I do think they ultimately will need a number one receiver. This whole receiver by committee thing is really good because they have a bunch of talented guys. I went to bat for Christian Watson a lot this season, and injuries or whatever, I was a little bit off on that. I don't think he is a number one now. It does really seem like Reed is the most talented dude in that receiving room, but I don't know if he is a number one. I think they need that guy to, again, go out and make some big plays for Jordan Love. And honestly, they need Jordan Love to be better. He was good. He was very good throughout this season. But for them to get to where they need to get to, I think we saw that there needs to be a bit of a leveling up there. On the Tampa Bay side of things now, after their Sunday night loss against the Commanders, this one is obvious. Defense. Defense. Offense is fine. They're probably going to lose Godwin. I think McMillan is all right as a number two. Your two-headed backfield with Irving and White works. Baker Mayfield is good. Mike Evans is still a beast. Offensive line-wise, I think they're all right. But this defense got gashed, and they just, so many times, they couldn't get a stop when they needed to. And, like, Vita Vea is a beast, but he is the only one that you feel really threatened by on the defensive side for the Buccaneers. So that needs to be something that is very much addressed this offseason, because I do think Atlanta's offense is going to be better. And I think there's going to be a step up from Carolina. This is still probably going to be the worst division in football when we get into the 25-26 season, but they are going to be facing a little bit more resistance if they want to win a division title for a third year in a row. And I think that they are going to need to shore that defense up in a big-time way. And then the last one. They were eliminated just a scant few hours ago. The Minnesota Vikings. It all focuses around Sam Darnold. Toxic asking in the chat earlier, Sam Darnold coming back to the Vikings? No, right? I don't know how you can at this point if you're Minnesota. I don't know how you can justify spending $30-40 million on a quarterback who fit into your system very well, but I think very, very obviously showed that there is a ceiling to what you can accomplish with him as your quarterback. And quite frankly, I don't know if that ceiling gets a whole lot lower if you just put McCarthy in there, or if you just sign, like I said, like a Russell Wilson or someone along those lines. Like if you just get veteran quarterback X and plug them in, and have $15 million extra to spend on maybe another weapon or maybe another defensive player or something along those lines, I don't think it is worth it for the situation they are in right now. Sam Darnold did an amazing job for them this season, and I think showed that he is a good quarterback. But I think you can still get to close to where they were with either taking a gamble that someone's going to turn into a great quarterback or average to above average quarterback play. That's kind of where I think Minnesota is right now. And so I think Darnold probably goes and finds some work elsewhere, but I don't think it'll be in Minnesota. I really like the rest of this team. I think defensively they got a lot of very strong players. I do think that Brian Flores is probably on his way out, and so they are going to need to find a very good defensive coach to help with that. But I think that they have a solid foundation in place right now, which is good because that division is going to be hella competitive. But I don't think they are that far off right now out in Minnesota. So that's the offseason look at the teams that got bounced from the playoffs. A little bit later on in this stream, and for podcasts and YouTube watchers, tomorrow we'll be doing the upset specials, how every team that is left as an underdog can pull off the upset this weekend.